Mark, thank you. A right to free speech does not mean a right to employment. Thousands of Americans have learned this in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination after celebrating online. The director of outreach for Defending Education, Erika Sanzi, wrote an article about this with the headline, "Teachers who delight in murder and assassinations are unfit for the job." She wrote, "Firing teachers who publicly celebrate political assassinations is not only defensible, it's necessary." Also posting on X, millions of kids in this country loved Charlie. They saw him executed on a live stream, and now they are expected to sit in classrooms with people who are celebrating their loss. She wrote, "This cannot be allowed." She wrote, "The small percent of educators must be fired if this nation is to heal." And joining us this morning is Erika Sanzi. Good Friday morning to you. First of all, some of these messages online are not only outrageous, they're not real because they're from bots meant to incite. However, mixed in with those vile messages of hate are some teachers and professors and educators who are facing some real consequences. And Erika, I think this was shocking to so many Americans to see that anyone would celebrate violence and murder on any kind of public platform. But how mind-blowing was this to see it from an educator, you know, the very person entrusted with teaching and shaping the minds of this next generation?
Yeah, I was really affected by this, and I'm not sure if it's because I was a teacher for 10 years or perhaps because I'm a mother of 3, but to see people who are in a position of authority and custodial care with other people's children, right? So educators, to see them publicly delighting in a political assassination in the immediate aftermath of that was, again, extremely sort of jarring for me. And I also found it to be utterly disqualifying for the job. So, and again, we're not talking about a private conversation with a spouse. We're not talking about them being out to dinner with their friends and making comments that I might find abhorrent, but it's in private. This was social media postings, so public platforms where they were, and again, these weren't criticisms of Charlie. These weren't like arguments against his positions. These were blatant celebrations of his murder. And I think that, again, this speaks to fitness for the job, right? So if my cashier at Wendy's or my mechanic or the person who delivers my packages has these opinions, I probably won't know that. And if I do know that, I have the option to take my business elsewhere. But for a teacher, this to me speaks to fitness for the job. And I just don't think people who celebrate in the murder of anyone, and certainly a high profile figure, because of their political beliefs, I just think that to me means you're unfit for that job and like you should go do something else.
Well, we're not just talking about people who are celebrating the murder of a father of 2 young children. We're talking about posts that literally stated, quote, "Violence is the answer. Violence, in fact, is okay. This is how you confront fascists." These are what some of these teachers are saying. So to your point, if they believe violence is the answer, what kind of danger does that pose for your own child, your own college student? What if they share in the same beliefs as Charlie? Do these educators believe murder is the answer?
The reason that I just don't understand this, it's like we're kind of like a 50-50 country, which means there's a really good chance that in those classrooms and in those schools, kids agree with Charlie or their families agree with Charlie, or perhaps it's not about politics, but it's more about their faith. Maybe they're a family that has really strong faith and they looked up to him for that reason. So now you're walking into a classroom and you're thinking to yourself, they're excited that somebody just was killed, and that person basically thinks a lot like I do. So does my teacher, would they be happy if me or my family was killed? I mean, and the other thing I would say that I think is super important about this is, to me, this is a nonpartisan conversation, right? I keep asking people who are, because there's a lot of people saying they shouldn't be fired. The unions are defending them. The ACLU is defending them.
And by the way,
in my life.
Right, and this is an inflection point. I'm glad you mentioned that, because critics are infuriated over the fired teachers who say it's their right to free speech when a young man was just killed over his right to free speech, a young man who spoke out against violence and encouraged civil debate on a college campus. So what can parents do to make their voices heard?
I mean, we are seeing parents make their voices heard, and certainly when they speak up, they need to, I would be saying, What would you be saying if this was Rachel Maddow or Van Jones or AOC? Because the standard is consistent. If somebody was celebrating publicly the murder of a commentator on the other side of the aisle, right? It's totally disqualifying. We're definitely seeing some action taken. Parents are rising up. Students actually are kind of rising up. But it does seem to depend a little bit on what state they're in and like whether or not their union or their local ACLU wants to take this up. Now, I agree there are First Amendment and free speech tensions here. But I kind of welcome that fight because I really would like to see people defend this. I want to have that debate.
Right. And it's also, you're free to hire and fire if you have a private company, too, in many instances, right? Defending Education's Director of Outreach, Erika Sanzi, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Have a nice weekend. Good to see you.
You too.